the end of the day. Now we proceed with another presentation on the medtech stage. And what about intellectual property? How do you protect what's yours? And this will be presented by Lauma Muižniece. Hello, Lauma. Nice to have you here. Lauma is Director of Technology Department at the Investment and Development Agency of Latvia. The floor is yours.
Hello, it's really wonderful to be here. It's a bit strange not to see the audience, but I mean, it's the same for everyone, right? Not just me. Anyway, hi to everyone who is listening. And I think this last year and a bit has shown us how important technology is for our lives. And of course, when we speak about technology, we speak about large investments, discoveries, putting our creativeness in motion. And then, of course, this is always accompanied by intellectual property. So I will give you a bit of a disclaimer. I'm not an IP lawyer myself, but I'm quite an IP enthusiast. And as Juris mentioned, I am the Director of Technology Department at the Investment and Development Agency of Latvia. And we really work with these issues on a daily basis. We see new products being developed, and we see what kind of problems they might run into. So my task today, basically, is to tell you about what intellectual property is as such, why you as young entrepreneurs should think about that, and also what are the main economic benefits from intellectual property, and in which terms and which areas to think. So again, my name is Lauma, and I'm very happy to be here. So what is intellectual property, you might ask? So intellectual property is types of property that result from the creations of the human mind, the intellect. Quite straightforward, right? Generally, we can divide intellectual property into two directions. So one is copyright and related rights, and one is industrial property. So copyright and related rights. Well, this is something that concerns artwork, drawings, music as well as performances of music. However, which might not be that straightforward, it also concerns different kind of software. Because what is software? Software is a written code. So when you talk about software, it's also copyright. It's also protected by copyright. Then when we talk about the other strand, that's industrial property. And it's, again, quite straightforward in the sense that already in the name itself, it says industrial property. So this is something that is meant to be used when you produce something. And there's different types of industrial property, also depending on in which country you live. Because intellectual property rights are territorial rights. So there are different rules in different countries. But generally, industrial property can be divided in inventions for which you can get patents. I think patents are some of the things that you have heard most about. Then you can have industrial design. You can have trademarks. You can have geographical indications and topographies of semiconductor products or utility models. Depends how well you orientate yourself in this area. You might have heard one of them more, some of them less. And then not rights as per se, because for you to have something, rights for something, you have to have it registered. So these are the things that you can actually register or that come into force automatically. But you can decide also not to register something and keep it as a trade secret. So it's not intellectual property as per se, but it's still something that is a creation of your mind that you want to keep secret. And of course, there are sometimes what you're doing in your business can also be protected against unfair competition. But we're not going to go too much into these areas today. So we're going to more cover the industrial property side of IP. So here in this picture, you see a smartphone, and I would just, of course, with a live audience, it's a lot easier to see what kind of types of intellectual property you can distinguish there. But of course, there's a ton. There's really a lot going on there. So first of all, there's this outer layout. So how the smartphone looks. So there's this layout. You can also see, like you see that there's a software going on, right? So there's different kind of codes written. Then there is the name for the software, which is most likely protected by a trademark. Then, of course, the name of the phone itself. Then whatever tunes there are when you switch on the phone and how the phone reacts with you. Then there's all the chemicals and all the circuits within the phone. This could be covered by patent protection. Then, of course, the different kind of button layouts on different sides of the phone, industrial design, and so on and so forth. And even copyright for the stuff that's in the user's manual, even that's protected. So you see that there's a lot going on there. But the question is, why? Why should anyone be concerned about this? So first of all, intellectual property gives an incentive to invent and create. Because inventors, when they patent something, for example, just using patent as an example, they patent something and then get revenue for whoever would like to use the patent, for example, through licensing, might get funds back for those invested when making this creation, this invention happen. It also leverages different kind of risks and uncertainties. So you know that what you have created is somewhat protected, and there are ways how you can make those accountable who are misusing your right. On the other hand, it also promotes innovation through disclosure of inventions. Because there is one thing that people don't really always remember. So either you keep something a secret and keep it just for yourself, or you disclose it and then it becomes known to the world, right? So this is the trade-off that you choose when you choose whether to register your rights or keep them secret. And sometimes it's very important for you to disclose something so that others can build on top of it. Not with the intention to copy it, no. With the intention to improve it, make it available, build on top of it. So this is also the way how patents, for example, promote innovation through the disclosure of inventions. It's also very important to think about intellectual property because technology that you don't control essentially is useless from value perspective. So if you don't control something, what can you do with it? It doesn't bring you any money. It doesn't, it might actually become a cost. And of course, if you don't manage your intellectual property, it essentially does not even exist. So we have to be very mindful about the kind of intellectual property that you have and how to use it, at what times, what should be the way how to utilize it. Because essentially, intellectual property is really a significant competitive advantage. and one that can be crucial in attracting investments, because this is what your investors will want to ask. So, is your IP protected? Are you sure you're not copying anyone else's rights? I mean, copying anyone else's inventions? Is that clear? So these are the questions that you are going to get asked. Overall, if we think about how things have changed, I would say that the landscape and the narrative for the use of intellectual property has changed quite a lot. So before it was, if we could sort of dive into similarities. So imagine I have a piece of land. Imagine I have a piece of land. And instead of inviting everyone to my piece of land that belongs to me and is registered under my name, I just say, no, stay off my property, come near me, I will shoot you. So this was the narrative before, also regarding intellectual property. Now the narrative has changed, and I have this piece of land. It's beautiful. I have taken good care of it, and now I say, please feel free to come and use my land. Just, you know, pay me something for it. So now this narrative really has changed in the sense that intellectual property, and this goes together with different kind of theoretical developments, also in innovation literature, for example, innovation theory, that everything has become more open. But open not in the sense that everything is available to you for free, but in the sense that there are things you can use for a reasonable price, for example. So you see that the narrative in general has changed quite a lot. But yeah, this is again another disclaimer that I should give you, is that intellectual property is such a vast field. It really is. Not to mention that there are different types of intellectual property. There's so many disciplines that touch upon intellectual property. There's economics, there's law, and so on and so forth. So it might be very easy to get lost somehow. So you might ask, so where to begin? What should I start with? I would say that one of the first things that you should do if you're an entrepreneur and if you have been in development and you see that your minimum viable product is almost there and you want to start getting investments, assess your overall situation. Then decide whether or not to secure your intellectual property rights. Then, of course, calculate the value of your intellectual property. This is quite crucial as well. And develop a strategy on how you're going to use that intellectual property. And sometimes you have to do all of these like in a perpetual motion because you might see that things are changing and you need to take a step back a few now and then. So regarding assessing your situation, so you have to understand what kind of type of intellectual property you have. Then what are the possibilities to protect this intellectual property in general? Is it novel? Is there any novelty actually? So have you thought about that? Possibility of reverse engineering and design around. So reverse engineering is basically when you buy something, and this was popular, and this is actually quite not only popular, and this is not illegal, and this is quite a crucial part of a country's economic development, is that you buy, for example, high tech from other countries, and to understand how they work, you break them apart. And then you learn from how they have been assembled and so on. Of course, for you as an inventor, what's not so great is that if a person can do that easily, and understand how your invention works, they can copy it, again, very easily. So you have to think about this. If it's possible, then it's better to disclose, patent, and protect it this way, rather to keep a trade secret and eventually somebody will be able to do that anyway. Because I have in my experience also, I've had questions from companies. I don't know, should I patent or not? Because when I patent, I give away all the knowledge and so on. But then I can't think of it. And then my logical question to this company is: so if I would break it apart, would I know how it works? The answer in that particular case was yes, you would know. And then my answer was yes, then patent. On the other hand, design around means something entirely different. Design around means that if you, for example, patent something and disclose the knowledge, it's available to everyone. It's public. Somebody can try to design something really, really, really close to what you're having, and have a competing invention. Both things are legal, by the way. And of course, last but definitely not least, it's really, really important to understand the possibilities to commercialize and implement in production processes. Because just the fact that you have invented something and you think it's something that somebody would need doesn't really mean that. And of course, one thing is that it might solve an actual problem. You also have to think about what kind of, for example, technical issues the company who would like to implement your invention would also need to have. Like how difficult or how expensive it is for somebody to use your invention and implement it, for example, in the production process. So these are all very important things. Yes, and how cheap, how easy it is to do that, and would anyone actually ever want that? So there's always this question, disclose or keep a secret. It's quite tricky. It really depends on the company's strategy. And here I want to tell you a bit of a crazy story that some people who have already heard my presentations know this story, but I have to be honest, I love it so much that I just really want to retell it once more. So I took an IP course in Strasbourg, and it was taught by a really a practicing IP lawyer with an experience of many years, and he told us this dilemma. So there was this company who could not decide whether to disclose something, to patent and make the knowledge available, or keep it a trade secret. Because the dilemma comes here. If you patent this, if you disclose it, it's available to everyone. So everyone can just go into patent databases and see what you have been up to. They didn't want that. But on the other hand, they were quite sure that in a few years' time, another company might be able to redid what they did and also come to the same conclusion. And the fact is, the crazy fact is, if this other company goes in and patents it, it's absolutely legal. They can do it. And they can put some limitations on the first company's claims. So what this professor suggested to the company: don't patent it, don't disclose it, but choose a random magazine somewhere in southern Germany. Publish it there. It's like Gardener's 101, like what to do with your garden in the spring. I mean, something that, I don't know, those of you from Latvia, Kokneses Vēstis or Madonas Stars would be a magazine that this professor suggested. So publish the description of the technology there. So it still is public knowledge, but it's not like actually anyone knows it's there. So just in the case another company years later would come and say, hey, we patented this, the original company would go and say, no, no, no. See, a couple of years ago we published this in Kokneses Vēstis. So they would kind of win the argument. So you see that there's a ton of different crazy schemes going on in the world of intellectual property. So, but it's always, it might be quite difficult for some companies to decide whether disclose or keep a secret. But I will also go through some pointers that might help you decide. So, as I have already mentioned, there are many options. But what is the minimum protection when it comes to your intellectual property? So, if you're considering a trade secret, then, of course, there have to be internal procedures, evaluation of reverse engineering possibilities in place. This is crucial. This is really crucial. So if you have a service, if you're running a service, then actually it could be a trademark. Because trademarks are like, for example, Coca-Cola or iPhone or iOS. These are all trademarks. Trademarks is the kind of registered mark that helps distinguish your product from another product. So if you're running a service, it could be a trademark. If you have a new product or a technological process, then yes, it could be a patent. But be very careful, think about which markets, because patenting is not cheap. It's definitely not cheap. And the longer you want to keep the patent going, the more expensive it gets, actually. So again, a question, to patent or not? What to do with this one? And of course, I could not go without a slide with a cat picture on it. Everyone loves cat pictures, I do too. But this is actually an illustration of a real patent. Yes, this is an illustration from a patent. So you can see that somebody has patented a method for exercising a cat. Yeah, so you can see that there's different kinds of, like with the laser pointer, you can do it like this and move it in this way or another way, and the cat is supposed to react. So you just go like that, and the cat reacts, and that's how you exercise a cat. Yes, believe it or not, it's a real patent. It has been patented. It's existing. So you can patent something like that. But what you have to remember is that while it might be possible to patent something, it's not that easy to enforce that. So how do you catch anyone using your method, actually, and when, and for commercial purposes? Because everyone can use this at home. They cannot use it for commercial purposes. So eventually, what is the point of this patent, other than it being fun, maybe prestigious for some kind of situations, and so on and so forth? So you have to think about this as well. So what are different kinds of economic benefits from intellectual property? So first of all, there's practice. You put your intellectual property into practice. So you create exclusivity for your product and what you're doing. Another option would be selling licenses. So you don't use it yourself, but you sell somebody the rights to use your intellectual property. And yes, this is actually an existing business model. You might use it for litigation. So it means you just go around and sue everyone who is using your intellectual property. And you can also use it for deterring, meaning that, for example, you patent a lot of things and use it when you enter new markets as a positive leverage when somebody else tries to attack you. So I will just go a bit into each of these types of economic benefits. So when you practice, this means creation of exclusivity, reduction of competition, forbidding others to use. So this means that you actually have a product, you have patented it, and you are zooming out the landscape and seeing whether anyone else is trying to infringe you, and just try to block the competitors so you keep this competitive advantage. And this is mainly used by manufacturing companies or service providers. Then litigation, this is far worse, I would say, in my personal opinion, type of economic benefit from intellectual property. But you do this with the aim to seize someone's business activities. It can be justified or unjustified as well. So it really can be justified. You see that somebody is infringing your rights, and you try to stop them. But it can also be unjustified in the sense that you solely keep an eye out for those who might unknowingly be infringing, or whether there's some, I don't know, difficult cases and so on and so forth. And this, I have to admit and underscore that this is used for patents only. And here you might have or haven't heard the term patent trolls. Patent trolls are non-practicing entities, so these are companies who are not selling anything themselves, but indeed they are existing for the sole purpose of acquiring large patent portfolios and then just going on and suing everybody. And this is their business model, unfortunately. Yes. Then deterring. Deterring is again something that's associated with defensive patenting. So this means that this is very important for entering new markets. When you enter new markets, it might be quite crucial for you to have quite a patent portfolio, just so that you can go into cross-licensing or try to negotiate in some way. So I was speaking with my friends at the United States who are dealing with all sorts of IP matters, and they asked me this rhetorical question. So what do you think is the percentage of anyone trying to get into the US market and getting a letter of cease and desist? Well, the answer was 100%. So this means that if you're trying to enter the US market, you will definitely get a nasty letter from somebody saying that, stop doing what you're doing. We don't like you. We don't like your product. And then in this case, it's very good also if you have a leverage that you can start the negotiations with, saying that, okay, so we don't like you either, but here's our patent saying that you're infringing our patent, and maybe we can work things out. So you see that this is really about negotiation and trying to find a common ground. So this is about, this is again one way how you can use your intellectual property. And then licensing. As I mentioned, the narrative for intellectual property has quite changed, and licensing, of course, I would say that when it comes to deep tech, is most likely the most sought after solution. So licensing means that the inventor, the author or the author of this invention, let's just talk about patents for the sake of simplicity. So, for example, this inventor is not willing or does not have the resources to develop the technology, but is willing to give others the chance to do so, and also by getting some money back. So this is called licensing. So licensing means to give the rights to use, including to spin-off companies. And this is quite typical also at the academic world, because universities don't generally build companies by themselves. They actually use the licensing model as well. There's different kinds of licenses. There can be exclusive licenses where you just give something to one person only. Then non-exclusive licenses, like they are available. Just as an example, for example, Microsoft Word license or Microsoft Office license. It's a non-exclusive license. There's a fixed price. Everyone can get it. And then there's also a sole license where I, as the inventor, can also keep the rights to use, and I also give it to one other company, for example. Yeah, licensing, it's tricky with licensing. There's a lot of negotiation involved. And there are licenses that are called carrot and stick licenses. Carrot licensing is that you give license as a benefit. Stick licensing is that you say is when you say, well, it seems that you're infringing our rights. You might want to buy a license from us. Then there's compulsory licenses. This might be, well, regarding medtech and space tech, this might actually might be something that's relevant. Compulsory licenses might be issued by the government, for example, if health or security crisis can be averted thanks to some kind of invention. And then if the company would not want to issue a license, then the government might step in and issue a compulsory license. And then, of course, there are open source licenses that we I think most of us also know, that these are free of charge licenses, but always be careful and read the terms and conditions part. I really remember there was one company who was asking me a comment on their product and whether it was okay for them to use a certain open source licensing platform. And I said, fine, looks good, but have you read the terms and conditions part? And the owner said, no, I haven't. And then we opened the terms and conditions part, and it turned out that the terms and conditions say that whatever he is developing on top of this open source platform belongs to the open source platform. That's not too good for a business, right? Yeah, so this might be quite tricky. And then, of course, there are different kind of collaboration models when it comes to licensing, so cross-licensing, intellectual property exchange, because as you can imagine, for example, with smartphones, there's thousands and literally thousands of licenses involved. And if everyone was paying these huge amounts of licenses to each other, nobody would be able to afford a smartphone. That's why there's different kind of cross-licensings and patent pools involved. So everyone pays just a small fraction of something. So depends on how important this particular element that's protected is to the whole product. Yeah, and now we come to calculating the value part. So it's quite tricky, right, to understand how much your invention is worth, and to be honest, there is usually no definite answer. It's worth as much as somebody else is willing to pay for it, right? But there are different methods how you can calculate the price of intellectual property. But again, as I mentioned, it all comes back to how much whoever is willing to pay for it. And there are different influencing factors for that. So, of course, the proportions of your intellectual property in the final product. So how big a part of the product your particular invention is. Are you willing to sell it or license out? Because through licensing out, you can get more benefits in a longer period of time. Selling is just selling. It's like, you know, selling an apartment or renting out an apartment. Kind of the same. So the different kind of characteristics of the market, is protection necessary or not, and what kind? Because there are really companies who are rather willing to just constantly innovate rather than patenting and protecting their IP and so on. And of course, the overall role of intellectual property in the industry, whether this is a standard or not, then again, completely different rules of the game appear and so on. And of course, the aim of the intellectual property. I already mentioned a few ways how you can use it economically. Of course, if your intent is to litigate, then some other then it, of course, changes the value. So be careful when you also negotiate the price and check what you have written in your agreements. So, for example, if you negotiate the price and say that, okay, I'm willing to sell you my invention, and I don't care if you don't pay me for the first 5 years, when you will start manufacturing, you can start paying me. But what if the problem is that the company that you're selling to is never going to manufacture? They don't even have the intention to do it. So this is something that you have to be mindful when you negotiate and when you draft your agreement. Yeah, of course, there are so many options to payments as well, different kinds. So you can choose, for example, royalties, which would be like rent, or down payments. Also, royalties would be like running amounts, saying that you earn 5% of the income of the revenue, for example. Down payments would be fixed payments each month or each year for your intellectual property. Yeah, so there can be running royalties or minimum royalties. Of course, when you find out that somebody has been infringing your rights, you can also ask for damages, and there are specific ways on how you calculate damages. And then, of course, you calculate what would be the net present value in a few years of your intellectual property, because it's a technology market and it changes really fast, and all of these factors need to be taken into account. Of course, the scope of the license. So there can be different ways where and how you license and to whom. So for example, I have an invention that I can license to somebody here in Latvia, but for a specific market, like medtech market. Then I know that I can also issue a license solely to, for example, the German market. And again, all of these factors come together and form the value of your intellectual property. And of course, as I mentioned, if something becomes a standard, a whole new set of rules apply. Yes, and of course, in the end, what plays the biggest role is the position of the licensor and licensee. Who is playing the power play, and who is in a bigger need to make this deal happen? So this is really important. And actually, to come to the last slide, I have been quite efficient, I guess, in my speech. Maybe a bit too efficient. I hope the moderator will not mind for that. But just to come to the main mistakes, I would say and conclude that I think the main mistakes is not taking IP into the picture. And also, I would say that one of the main mistakes is to actually not involve any kind of IP professionals, because this is, as you saw from what I told you, this is quite a complex task, and a lot of different kind of law aspects are involved. So it's really important to involve professionals who can help you with this. And it's also very important to think about the timing, because there are different ways when and how you can protect your intellectual property. And it's really important to see that you do it at the right time. Because if you don't, you might really run into some serious costs before you are actually ready to confront them. So I would say that these are the main mistakes that companies run into, and you should look out for. Thank you. That will be all from my side.
Thank you, Lauma, so much. While I'm checking if there are any questions from the audience, maybe you could answer my question. If I say intellectual property infringement in Latvia, does anything pops up in your mind? Any scandals or things like that during the past 5 years, let's say so?
Oh yeah, definitely pops into my mind, but I'm I'm quite sad that I can't go into too much detail because that actually is a really interesting story. But I don't know if somebody from the company is maybe listening, they could. But I will try to make. I will try to find also on the internet the description. But there was a company called Rocket Grip. And Latvian company who they were making how do you call those grips for hockey sticks?
Yes.
Yeah. And they were quite successful, and they were pupils still in the school. So this was this school company.
Very young boys.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Teenagers.
Yeah.
They're 16 or 15 years old. I remember that. And the thing with that grip was they developed an absolutely new technology how to tighten that grip with the help of
Water.
hot
I think
water.
It was, yeah.
I guess it
yeah,
was hot water.
It was made from rubber, and you put it on the hockey stick, and just you put it in the water, and it sort of melts around the hockey stick. It's genius. Like a very nice solution. And what happened was that they actually got this letter, this love letter I mentioned. They got the cease and desist letter from a Canadian company. I don't remember the specifics how they solved it, but with the help of our patent office of Latvia, they managed to get out of trouble. But this just shows that doesn't matter how young you are, how ambitious you are, and where you live, it still can happen to you as well.
Yeah, and I remember the problem was that they were threatened with a fine so big that, well, it was like a story of several $100,000 or something like that they should pay in case if they are found guilty.
Yep,
so
exactly.
That was pretty scary. So in the platform, we don't have any questions from the audience. Lauma, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. And of course, if some questions pop up later, I will be happy to check in the platform. And this topic is indeed quite difficult to grasp, but sometimes as well. But really, my pleasure to be here and give you some insights into it.
If anybody wants to get in touch with you concerning these questions of IP, then it's possible through the virtual expo. Just get in touch with the Latvian Investment and Development Agency and ask whatever you want. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.